what's also been done, and here I would like to credit Tata Motors, is that they made CNG cool.
Now we are seeing almost 25 CNG models in the Indian market for an Indian consumer to choose from.
I wonder how much of this is because people prefer CNG over diesel, or the fact that there's no diesel and they don't have another alternative to diesel, so they're going for CNG.
CNG has played an absolutely critical role in helping Maruti Suzuki to protect its market share.
I think it's a very, very practical solution right now for a lot of customers, consumers looking for, let's say, low cost motoring. Hello and welcome back for your weekly dose of everything automotive on Deep Drive, our podcast powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. Now, on this episode, we're going to be talking about CNG. Now, it's not a very cool fuel, but slowly and quietly, it has overtaken diesel. So what we're going to be talking about is, why is CNG becoming so popular? Can it replace diesel? And is it the new diesel? I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
Hi, I'm Ketan Thakkar. Yes, Hormazd, some interesting numbers out here.
Exactly, Ketan. So I think the question is, CNG really people buy it because of the low running cost. And the question is CNG the new diesel?
It looks like, Hormazd, looking at the numbers of the financial year 24-25, CNG car sales have grown by a whopping 35%, accounting for almost 19 to 20% of the Indian passenger vehicle market. And that's in a market which is growing at about 2.5%. And diesel has grown by 5%. Surprise, surprise, petrol has declined by 6% in a market which is seeing a significant shift in powertrain in this slow.
Yeah. I'm absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm not surprised because I think it's all about running costs. I think the new generation of petrols which have come, a lot of them are turbo petrols. A lot of them are optimized for emissions. It's had an impact on fuel efficiency as the ethanol content also goes up. Now with E20, one downside of that is poorer fuel efficiency. So I think petrol, as far as a running cost, from a running cost perspective, is under challenge.
Absolutely.
I'm not surprised that even diesel has grown, but CNG, I think, gone ahead, and diesel was what, about 18-19%?
Just about a percentage point lower than CNG, because there is this growing demand for SUVs where diesel is a predominant fuel. Right. But even in the mid-size space, we started witnessing more CNG alternatives emerging.
So it's fair to say that CNG has now, without a doubt, overtaken diesel as far as market share goes in this financial year.
Absolutely, Hormazd. And this has happened for the first time ever. And what is phenomenal is the rise of the segment. Just before COVID, the segment was just about 2% of the market. Now it has grown almost 10 times to 20% of the market. And here you got to give credit to the government of India for pushing towards more cleaner alternative.
And I think lowering the
fuel bill,
because we import about 85%
Absolutely.
of our requirements.
Absolutely.
And that's a hell of a lot. And really, I think that's just going up and up as our consumption increases. I think that is a big worry for the government. That's why I keep hearing them say that, look at alternatives. Biofuels is something looking at. But I think CNG seems to be a very viable alternative. And more than anything, customers are lapping it up.
Absolutely. And they're walking the talk. The commitment is being seen on ground zero. The CNG fuel stations, which was a big challenge, which was earlier only concentrated in Gujarat, Maharashtra, and some part of NCR. Now it has proliferated to many more states. And the distribution has now expanded to almost 7,500 stations across the country. And the government of India is keen on taking it up to 17,500 by the end of this decade. So clearly there is that push towards more gaseous options.
Exactly. I think that, to me, I think the biggest, let's say, hurdle has been, like with EVs, is always the
infrastructure.
One, charging infrastructure. Here it's CNG infrastructure. And it's taken so many years to come to this level, because the image I always have of a CNG car is that you're in this long queue with taxi drivers and let's say cabs over there, really taking up the bulk of it, and you're right, waiting to fill up as well. So really inconvenient in that sense. But obviously, I think that's becoming much better right now.
Absolutely, it is. At 7,500, it's getting better and it is going to get further better. And government is also on its path trying to see that whether the prices can be kept under control. Mind you, post 2020, for about a couple of years, there was a sudden spike in CNG prices because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis and the global prices moving up. When it comes to CNG source, a lot of it is also produced in house. We do rely on the global imports, but prices are always linked to the global market prices. So government on its part is trying to see as to how they can contain any kind of artificial spike that we see because of the global nature of how the prices are determined. So in about 2023, I think government formed the Kirit Parekh committee in order to ensure that the gas prices do not go through the roof. I think between 21 to 23, CNG prices in Mumbai at least went up from 49 to 77.
But right now, I think it's stabilized at around 77.
Yes, the last couple of years, it has stabilized at around 77. And that has ensured that the popularity grows. In fact, if you were to look at sub-segments, Hormazd, in the hatchback and the sedan space, now literally everything has been, from a compact dimension perspective, sub 4 meter, everything is now being replaced. Diesel has been replaced by CNG.
And I think, what's also been done, and here I would like to credit Tata Motors, is that they made CNG cool in the sense that, it wasn't, you had the perception of CNG, it's fleet, it's taxi, not very upmarket, to be honest, and as I said, queuing up with other, taxis or fleet cars, it just didn't really give you that very kind of, let's say, upmarket vibe, and there was a perception issue there. I think what Tata Motors has done is, with their CNG models, they've not stinted on the features. That's something which Maruti did because clearly Maruti were positioning at fleet where you really didn't need the features. So very basic interiors. I think Tata Motors, with their models, I think they have a really kind of, let's say, given it the kind of same sort of status as any other fuel as far as features goes, as the way they drive. And I think technology over the years also, it's really improved and made that gap between petrol and CNG a lot smaller.
Right.
So, so I think, I think even the cars are becoming a lot more appealing. They were not appealing before, but now they're a lot more appealing. And I think with Tata, we'll be seeing some, their first turbocharged
CNG engine
with the next one.
Right. And two key factors happened, Hormazd. One was the dual CNG that Tata Motors came
out with. The dual cylinder.
Yeah, dual cylinder CNG that Tata Motors came out that created a lot of space at the back.
And or an innovative thing to do. Yeah.
Right. And also with the BS6, I think a lot of retrofitment fear that people had of safety with the tanks being fitted from out in the market. Post BS6, a lot of those CNG tanks were actually produced in house by Maruti, Hyundai, Tata.
And I think if you see the data also post BS6 with diesel going, I think people were forced to pivot more towards CNG. I'm sure the data bears that out that, you had diesel quite high before BS6, which is April 2020. And suddenly after that, you suddenly saw this sharp kind of pivot towards CNG.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, Hormazd, especially in the compact dimension, in the sub 4 meter hatchback and the sedan space, literally everything went from diesel to CNG. And also in the mid-size UV space, we started seeing almost double digit of CNG penetration there. So we are seeing attraction for CNG across price points, across body type. And now from about, say, a dozen odd option, largely driven by Maruti Suzuki, now we are seeing almost 25 CNG models in the Indian market for an Indian consumer to choose from.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me is I wonder how much of this is because people prefer CNG over diesel, or the fact that there's no diesel and they don't have another alternative to diesel, so they're going for CNG. I think it's the latter because, quite frankly, all said and done, the CNG does have some challenges when it comes to drive feel.
Right.
Performance isn't as good as a petrol. You don't get that kind of mid-range kick or torque of a diesel where you really feel that surge of power. So really, they've been compromised on power, though that gap is increasing. And, I think that's just the nature of the fuel, because, it's a gas. So clearly you lose out on things like volumetric efficiency, and really it's not as kind of the energy density of CNG isn't that much of a liquid fuel, which is petrol or diesel. So I think, it would be interesting to see if diesel was there, but it's not.
Right.
But clearly, at least I think now customers are warming towards this. And, I mean, a lot of countries have CNG as their predominant fuel. I mean, I was right now, last year I had gone to Uzbekistan, and my God, there's gas is just, all the cars run on gas over there. So I think clearly this is something which, makes sense, especially given, our kind of situation vis-a-vis imports, vis-a-vis running costs, and vis-a-vis the how easy it is to really adapt petrol engines to CNG with the technology is also improving.
So these are largely biofuel options, Hormuz. I mean, tomorrow, if one were to move to pure CNG from a performance perspective, from a fuel efficiency perspective, from the challenges that you see.
Yeah, I think they're all biofuel, because at the end of the day, you still want that safety net of, what if I run dry or my tank runs out? I can still switch to petrol, a little bit of petrol in my tank, and I can go. Secondly, petrol has another advantage. You need to run it a bit on petrol, because petrol being a liquid, it has certain lubrication qualities, and you need that for your engine parts, your valve seats, your valves, your valve guys, all the internal parts need that lubrication, because CNG is a very dry, it's a gas after all.
Right.
So it's dry, so you don't get that level of lubrication. But having said that, I think the best option is a pure CNG vehicle, and for several reasons. The most important being is you can run a much, much higher compression ratio, which automatically unlocks a lot more power or gives you more power, because CNG, the octane rating typically is about, 120, maybe 130 octane number, whereas with petrol, it's between now, 93 and 98.
Right.
Or 100 right now, but that's really expensive at
Right.
$160. So not many people use that, but it's in the range of 93, 95, which is much, much lower. But so when you run biofuel, you have to kind of, let's say, design your compression ratio to meet the lower octane rating of the petrol, which means you don't get the benefit of the higher octane rating of CNG. So if there was pure CNG, definitely a high compression ratio is one thing. And then I think the valve seats, everything would be more hardened. They would have a different metallurgy, different, compounds being used to really compensate for the lack of a liquid fuel or the lubrication you get from a liquid fuel. So I think that is really the ultimate way to go for a CNG. But I think, I think the infrastructure really, really has to improve, where it becomes as convenient to refill your tank as it is a normal petrol or diesel car. Yeah.
Right. Hormazd, do you think that earlier the conception was that the CNG is largely meant for taxi guys who are looking for fuel efficiency, and it's only meant for a compact dimension? But over the last few years, we've actually seen Maruti Suzuki really pushing the pedal when it comes to Ertiga, Grand Vitara, and I think the elder sibling of Grand Vitara, Y17, it's also potentially likely to have a dual cylinder CNG. Do you think there's space for CNG at a higher price bracket, and they'll be takers? Or at least in the last 12 to 18 months, Maruti has proven that a personal buyer can actually buy a CNG vehicle.
I think it will, but clearly I think the appeal of CNG goes down as you go into bigger segments, because number one, you're not that fuel efficiency conscious over there. You want that power. You don't want to trade off the power. So it'll be a strong turbo petrol, or at least a diesel, where diesels are still thriving in that segment. We know that. I mean, if you see Mahindra, 84% of their sales are diesel, because they're in that segment of, the kind of Thar Rocks and above.
Right.
So clearly that's a very predominantly diesel driven. It's understood why, because you want that torque, you want that power, which a CNG can't give. And there's a bit of a mismatch between the whole image of an SUV and why you're buying it with the thing. But also don't forget, there's the other issue of a CNG. It takes up a lot of space.
Right.
It's a big tank over there.
Right.
That also has to be packaged properly. So there are issues over there. But, I think, to be honest, going forward, I think you might see a fight back from diesel, especially the regulations don't change. Diesel will continue to be popular in these segments. But lower down, where the economics of diesel don't make sense to give you the powertrain, I think CNG is turning out to be a great option. And, as you said, with the distribution improving, I think, it can only get better.
Yeah, the cost per kilometer equation, despite the recent increases in 21 to 23.
I think that's the real kicker, isn't it? I think it's about 3 rupees a kilometer on an average.
Absolutely.
maybe
almost double for petrol.
Yeah, almost 4 or 5 for diesel, and then 6 for petrol. That's really, I think, the most compelling reason why people are going in for CNG. It is the running cost, and you are willing to accept the compromises, as I said, of lower power or lower performance,
Right.
and also a refilling experience which isn't as, let's say, convenient as petrol or diesel.
Absolutely. You mentioned about regulation, Hormazd. Do you think when it comes to cafe, probably that's where CNG also becomes a very critical part of portfolio?
Absolutely. I think absolutely that's where it becomes. I think, that's how Maruti have really scored on their cafe numbers without having electric, is on their, high proportion of CNG.
Absolutely.
So
phenomenal numbers, Hormazd.
Yeah, phenomenal numbers over there. So I think CNG definitely, from a cafe point of view, I think fundamentally is good for the environment as well, because generally it's cleaner. It lends itself to better efficiency. But I think, as you said, government's doing a great job in pushing it. Would I buy a CNG vehicle? Maybe not yet. So, but honestly, I think there's a lot of powertrains which are going to be competing with CNG. You've got even electric at one point. So, people are going to see the value in that if they can afford it, as probably the lowest running cost option.
Absolutely. Hormazd, in fact, if you were to really look at numbers specifically, Maruti, has been the biggest driving force.
Yeah, they're top dog in CNG.
Absolutely. And almost a third of its sales comes from CNG. They have a segment share of over 71% in the CNG market. Even at Tata's and Hyundai, Tata Motors, about 14% of their total sales came from CNG.
That's a pretty good number also.
Yeah. If you were to actually combine both CNG and electric for Tata, almost 1 in every 4 car that Tata Motors sells today is cleaner.
Yeah.
Similarly, for Maruti, almost a third of its portfolio is cleaner, and it's pinches less on the wallet of a consumer, pinches less on the a wallet of government as well, with the lower imports and all, and actually delivers where the consumer wants it. And even from Hyundai's perspective, almost 13% of its total sales comes from CNG. So we are seeing a sizable CNG share for individual companies, but it'll be interesting to see whether rest of the market actually taps into this opportunity, because
Yeah, I think it's a brand thing for a lot of companies. I mean, I don't see companies like, let's say, the Volkswagen Group doing anything big with CNG, because, it kind of, in a lot of people, and maybe rightfully so, it kind of lowers the brand value when you go in for CNG. So I think that's just how it is. So I think a lot of brands may not go in for CNG, but there's peripheral brands. I think the top brands in India, they are the leading brands, because they are with every possible fuel source,
Right.
powertrain option,
Right.
which it is. And I think, Tata Motors in particular, if you look at them, they're the only brand or the only manufacturer which has a decent size in every possible fuel.
powertrain.
Electric, they're leading.
Right.
CNG, they are number 2 right now.
Right.
And of course, you've got petrol, diesel, where they're very mainstream. I think if you want to be a serious player in India, if you want to have good numbers and volumes, you can't ignore CNG.
And you got to get your powertrain strategy sorted.
That's right.
But it also adds to a lot of headache, right, from an R&D standpoint, Hormazd.
I think, it's not so difficult right now. I think, technology has improved. And as I said, that gap with, engine calibrations, all that. I think people have, the manufacturers have really made the kind of delta between running on petrol and running on CNG as a biofuel.
Right.
There's not that much of a performance impact, which is good. But as I said, ideal solution would be to, be pure CNG. Even then, it wouldn't give you the same kind of power and performance as a petrol, just because, the energy density isn't there. But it would be a lot,
Right.
it'd be a lot more efficient, and performance would be a lot better.
Right.
But I think actually it's fairly simple, the technology, and, it's been around for a while. It's just kind of optimizing it more and more. Safety was a big concern, as you know, especially with the retrofitters. But now with factory fitted options, and all of them, even being crash tested like
Right.
that. So I think, it's those concerns are concerns of the past. I think with every technology, you will have concerns. I mean, everyone worried about EV fires.
Right.
Now they are becoming less and less.
Right.
I think even with CNG, I think the retrofitters gave it a bad name, cylinders exploding, all that sort of thing. So I think, with time, as you see that, the safety issues are taken care of, the confidence automatically grows from the car buyer.
And what is interesting, Hormazd, is that despite the change in regulation from BS4 to BS6, the price difference between a petrol and a CNG was barely about 90,000 to 110,000. And that price gap actually remained. We saw with the diesel, that price gap actually shot up significantly, making diesel a lot more dearer for a prospective buyer to transition to a diesel.
Because, BS6 was a completely different ballgame. I mean, diesels became laboratory on wheels, especially with SCR tanks and AdBlue and all that, and converting NOx into, let's say, nitrogen and other harmless gases. Very, very challenging. You need literally, I call it a laboratory on wheels, which they had to do, these chemical reactions.
Right.
But with CNG, not so. And in any case, the emissions profile of CNG, is easier to manage from that sense. How do I say, NOx and PM is not so much of an issue, particulate matter, which it is with diesel. So, it just made, it was just more practical. I think it's a very, very practical solution right now for a lot of customers, consumers looking for, let's say, low cost motoring. Even the vehicles are not that expensive.
And so do you think with the future WLTP norms and the BS7, where potentially the cost pressures may be there also CNG in a way helps and scores?
Yeah, I think it does, because clearly, look, I think at the end, everyone has to move towards some form of electrification. But in India, we see this long transition. And I think we've seen it. There are surprises. I mean, when you thought diesel was going to go down, it's actually gone up. Diesel's gone down in Europe, but it's gone up here, because at the end of the day, I think what policymakers, they don't ask the consumers what do they actually want.
Right.
And I think what's clear, what they want is something which is always easy on the pocket and, is kind of, let's say, very practical to use.
Right.
So I think, in that sense, CNG also is fighting back. I think every fuel is, in with a fighting chance. And that's what makes it very interesting.
Now, it was surprising to look at the last financial year numbers, FY25, that diesel actually grew. Yes, the SUV growth is one of the biggest contributing factor, but petrol declining was a surprise to me. But yes, some fuel had to eat into the other fuel, right? I mean, electric vehicle, they grew by 15%, hybrid grew by 15%, diesel was up 5%. It was only petrol that went down.
Yeah, and I think one could say, you could put this on few manufacturers. Like diesel growth, I would put on Mahindra,
right?
Because they had a phenomenal growth in the last year, and they've been growing up, hitting 50,000 units, absolutely brilliant. I think petrol going down, you could put on Maruti, because their market share is coming down, and they're pivoting more and more towards CNG.
Yes.
So I think, you just can pin it down to a handful
few manufacturers.
And hybrid, we know they're going up, because we're seeing what Toyota is doing as well, and Maruti in that mix as well. So clearly, each one has, each fuel has got a champion, a manufacturer who kind of, has been, let's say, been a large reason for a large chunk of its sales.
Right. And I also feel that the growth will sustain purely because the government of India is very committed towards more gas-based economy. And if technology were to improve, like you mentioned, probably a pure CNG-based vehicle in the future that improves the performance with better distribution and with prices under check, I think at least till 2027, the government of India is going to keep a close eye on the prices of CNG. Probably after that, it may be linked to the market prices, like how it is in case of diesel and petrol. But at least till 2027, I think the government is going to be very keen on ensuring that the price gap, or rather the prices of CNG, remains contained. And with more and more alternative in different price brackets, I think the segment is poised for a sustained growth, and probably the more fuel efficient, more pragmatic buyers in tier 2, tier 3 cities will go for CNG vehicles, where distribution is becoming better and better as the time goes by.
And I think it'll come to a point where even manufacturers, which so far have tried to stay away from CNG for strategic reasons, for brand reasons or whatever, I think they will also kind of, let's say, join the party in that sense. And, you can't ignore it beyond a point. So I think that's what would happen. And, you see cars like the Altos CNG, it's a car that, it's nice to drive, looks good, feels good, that sort of thing. Okay, performance not as good as you'd expect from you don't want a turbo petrol in that kind of a hatchback, a premium hatch. But honestly, for normal commuting, it just does the job fine. And frankly, in today's day and age, we're just driving largely in stop and go conditions on path throttle. Uh, a CNG just works absolutely fine. So I think it's even the entire driving environment, especially in cities which are getting overcrowded and congested. I think the fact that people are kind of leaning more towards efficient powertrains, not necessarily most powerful, because that's really a more practical solution.
Hormazd, just a technical question. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud while you're speaking. As the time goes by, 7 years, 8 years down the line, how do CNG vehicles usually perform? Their wear and tear, the resale. Are there challenges on that?
Yeah, there are challenges on that. I think, obviously, I think the resale is not as strong as, regular petrol or diesel vehicles. And I think wear and tear, I think theoretically, yes. But I think manufacturers have done a lot, especially near the valve seats. That material needs to be very, very hard. That's where it forms a seal between, the inlet and the combustion chamber or the exhaust. So I think key components, they have been upgraded in terms of metallurgy. I don't think too much of a problem. And I think also with the fact that now vehicles are biofuel and they run a little bit on petrol, I think the longevity issue, it's not such a big concern.
Right. Any other challenges you see, Hormazd, when it comes to CNG segment?
I think the biggest challenge, honestly, is performance. Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge still, because you are seeing other powertrains getting, let's say, improving in terms of performance and power. And, you're seeing these electric vehicles, which are just absolute rockets off the line. And CNG in comparison feels like a slow duck.
Right.
Obviously the price delta is huge.
Significant.
But, at it's coming to a point where, consumers, it's very hard to predict. He might walk into a showroom looking at with a budget of 6 lakhs and then walk out with something worth 12 lakhs.
Absolutely.
So that's just how it is. So I think performance and the thrill of driving just not there in a CNG vehicle. I think that's something which I don't think can be, let's say, kind of, it can't match other fuels in that area, even if there was pure CNG. So I think that is one thing which those customers, they may not get. But I think the good thing is that people have realized that in today's day and age, all they want is simple, stress-free commuting. They don't have time to use power and performance. But, going out of town and all, it's a different ballgame. So I think these are more city-specific products where, where your, let's say, your pump is or fuel station is, CNG fuel station is, and you've got that ecosystem sorted out. On the highway, yes, you get them as well, but again, not as convenient as petrol and diesel. In fact, we've seen that after BS6, when Maruti abruptly stopped, making diesel, the only other option really was CNG from an efficiency, low running cost powertrain option that they had. Absolutely. And they really pushed that. And Ketan, I think you've got some numbers to see how it really pivoted literally on its head in 1 year.
No, it's phenomenal, Hormazd. I think Maruti used to do almost like 500,000 diesel just before BS6, and now almost more than 500,000 CNG sales comes from Maruti Suzuki. And just
what was the CNG before BS6?
Barely anything, Hormazd. Only 2% of the market was CNG.
Yeah, but Ketan, what I meant is, what was Maruti's share of CNG before BS6 and before they got out of diesel?
So interesting, Hormazd. Just before Maruti could phase out the diesel powertrain in 2019 calendar year, the share of diesel was 22% and CNG was just 1%. Come to calendar year 2020, the diesel share falls down dramatically as they discontinue it to 2%, but a CNG share goes up to 8%. And talk about 2025, so far in this calendar year, the share has gone up to 33%. It ended 2024 with 31%, with sales of almost 500,000 CNG cars, 5.4 at 48 lakh.
We have successfully pivoted.
Absolutely. I mean, and it has been a phenomenal switch that Maruti has been able to do and protect its share while it has gone down. But CNG has played an absolutely critical role in helping Maruti Suzuki to protect its market share. And if you were to just go beyond Maruti Suzuki, and if you were to look at specific sub segments, Hormuz, in the sub 4 meter segment, the share of CNG right now is 21%, whereas diesel is 9%. In the mid-size space, the share of CNG is about 20%, whereas diesel is 15%. And of course, large SUVs, predominantly diesel, with about 63% share. If you were to look at body style, hatchback, the share of CNG is 18%, diesel is 0, sedans is 42%. Yes, predominantly led by the cab guys.
Right.
Diesel is 0.
Yeah.
SUVs.
And you're talking about their sub 4 meter sedans as well.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So we put in the Desire into
Desire, Aura.
itself, really skews the number.
Absolutely. In SUVs, interestingly, the share of CNG is 10%, diesel is 30%, and in MUVs, the share of CNG is 35%, led by Ertiga, of course.
Yeah.
Whereas the share of diesel is about 12%. So we've seen, how CNG has literally made inroads in every possible segment of the Indian passenger vehicle market.
Yeah.
And it has been a phenomenal story and a rise in a short span of 4 years.
But again, interestingly, it's all been led by Maruti. All
Absolutely.
these segments, if you look at it.
Absolutely.
Because even if you look at it in the MUV segment, MPV segment, I mean, Toyota's got no CNG.
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
largely driven by Maruti Suzuki. 70% of total CNG sales in the country comes from Maruti Suzuki. I think for the first time, the market was over 8 lakh units, about 40,000 more than diesel in the financial year FY25.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But, Ketan, it leads me to one point which I feel, I mean, while Maruti has done 70%, 70%
of
of
the CNG
CNG
sales
with Maruti, I think it impacts their brand.
It does.
Because whatever you say, you just don't have that appeal of CNG is just not there. I think it kind of does something to your brand. I think that's what Maruti's been suffering from. They've done Nexa and all that. That's fine. But as you see, you go up to the higher segments. I mean, Invicto is a classic example of look at high cross numbers and look at Invicto numbers. And you just can't compare.
Right.
So I think while they've done Nexa to kind of give them that upmarket positioning, different brand, almost a different face of the company.
Absolutely.
Or a new face totally, I still think, having such a large CNG portfolio, I think at some level it does impact their brand image and, the brand clout they would have otherwise probably had.
No wonder they keep advertising the Grand Vitara hybrid whenever we have major cricket tournaments or big developments happening in the economy or in interesting shows. We see Grand Vitara hybrid being pushed as a sort of a technology showcase from Maruti.
That is right now their flagship. I mean, it's a really super vehicle. I mean, as a hybrid, it really runs well as a strong hybrid. But at the same level, you've got some CNG products as well.
Right.
And, while they may be in different showrooms completely and different networks altogether, I think customers do realize that at the end of the day, it's got an S on the nose.
Yeah.
And, it is common at one point.
Absolutely, Hormazd. So I think horses for courses, maybe, consumers at a lower price bracket will continue to look for CNG, but at a more aspirational, higher price bracket would still continue to prefer a hybrid EV or a diesel.
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, what the demand for CNG tells you is that, Indian car buyers, we're a very practical lot. We don't mind sacrificing that performance, maybe a little bit of image as well, to get something that is going to be, get me do a long commute without any hassle.
Right.
And the fact that the ticket price itself is low. I'm sure those people would love an EV, but to buy an EV itself is, maybe double the price of a CNG equivalent,
Absolutely.
So in that sense, I think it's, at the end of the day, it's all about affordability as well and low running costs. And I think that's really why, CNG has grown. I think it will grow further. And again, it all boils down to distribution. We've seen that EV growth finally, out of all the concerns that they have, charging infrastructure is becoming the biggest impediment. It's been that way for CNG for, I think, 30 years.
Right.
Till today, it's not perfected, which means I always wonder, when is the EV infrastructure going to get, to that level? That's a different discussion altogether. But I think with, finally, as you said, the government push the absolute kind of, let's say, priority given to increasing the spread of the network.
Gas
I
distribution.
think that is one, exactly. I think that's one thing that will play towards, a further kind of, let's say, demand and popularity for CNG.
Absolutely, Hormazd.
So that's it from us this week on Deep Drive. But do tune in every Saturday at 11 a.m. And to make sure that you don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you're driving to work or taking a long drive, you can even hear us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thanks for watching.